Hello, welcome to this game review. So in this one, we will talk a bit about statics and dynamics and how to handle the King's Indian and the specific structure that arose in this game. Later, of course, we got an endgame in which, well, we didn't really get to play the endgame as you accepted the drop, but in this one, some kind of psychological improvement can be made, as we will talk about. So we have the King's Indian, kind of the main line, bishop e2, bishop e3. This is an interesting line. The point is kind of that now this is not good for black, because after knight d2, white can play g4, and he can even castle queenside. So if black can't play f5, he will not be doing very well. So black took here, this is all quite possible, f3, and knight c6. So this is kind of the old line here. Nowadays people play c6 with the idea to play d5 right away. And objectively black should be kind of fine here if he is very precise. So white should know some kind of theory to get some kind of small advantage here. But after knight c6, this is considered slightly worse for black, because now white will not have to deal with d5 in the near future. So for example, after castles, if black just starts exchanging pieces, developing naturally, white will be doing very well. Eventually the plan is to put the knight on d5. If black wants to take it, we will take with the c pawn and then attack the pawn on c7. Otherwise, if black can't tolerate the knight, he will play c6. We will move the knight, and then d6 will be a weakness. Instead, you took on c6, but this wasn't really necessary, as now this change of structure only benefits black. At the moment, the structure was already good for white, so if we have a good structure, we do not need to change it. Again, white has the plan of putting the knight on d5. But now black is threatening d5, and here he could already play d5. And the problem is, since we're not castled, this bishop is a little bit loose. And black will be in time to exchange the pawns, for example, rook d1, bishop b7 to defend the queen, and the white will be forced to take, and the white will probably have nothing. Black has good bishops, all the pieces are developed, and he has enough dynamics. But knight h5 now castles. Black decides to play for f5, but this doesn't really do too much. Indeed, white takes on f5, which is natural enough, queen e7, bishop d4, exchanging some pieces. And black decided to take with the pawn on f5. This may have looked scary, but it is possible. g4 is not very good because of the very nice move, bishop to d3. And the point is to put the queen on d3, because now there would be a fork. Otherwise, if you take here, he will take here, and black is more or less fine, as all the pieces are hanging, both the knight and the bishop, so black will be more or less okay. But he took with the pawn, and this has clear structural deficiencies. Now there is an isolated pawn on the f5 square. Also, black has doubled pawns here, an isolated pawn on a7. And the problem with these pawns are not that they're weak, but that they will become weak if they start going forward. For example, if d5 is played at any point, then the c5 pawn, c5 square will be weakened, and so which means black can't really create a passed pawn like white can on the king side. So bishop g7 and f4. Now the knight goes back, bishop f3, bishop d7, and here you decide to exchange off all the rooks, which is possible, as generally if we have static advantages, we usually want to go to an endgame where the pawn structure will matter more than it does currently. And this is quite possible. Rook f1, he plays king f8, but there's no reason to take here, because we can ask ourselves what the opponent is trying to do. And it seems that he doesn't really have many moves. We can just improve the position with b3, and if the opponent wants to take here and play rook e8, well, then we will oblige, and we will get this extra move. But this is quite small nuances. So rook e8 and rook e1, this is fine, queen e7, and we get this endgame. And it should be clear that white has the advantage, a clear one, because white has the majority on the king side. Also, there is a weakness on f5. this black bishop will always have to be passive if we get to reroute our bishop. And also black's majority on the queen side can't really move, as d5 will create a lot of weaknesses. In the game, black tried c5, c6, and then d5, but then the pawn on c5 would be quite weak. So if black could move the pawn to the b file, then playing c6, d5 would be a lot simpler, as it would not create any real weaknesses. So white is clearly better, and playing such endgames is a big part of chess, and we don't really have to calculate that much here, as black doesn't really have much counterplay. So even if you're low on time, we can just make a move that we understand is useful. For example, in the endgame, the king is extremely important. Why not just play king f2? This will definitely be useful. The king can either go that way or that way. In either case, this is a better king, and black would probably play something like c5 again. Then we can now start thinking about what to do. One idea is to pile up on this pawn, for example, knight d1, knight d3, and go from there. If black tries c6, d5, then this square will be very weak, as there is no b pawn, so we can try to target it. And this passed pawn on the d file will not be extremely powerful. As we can see here, for example, white started wasting kind of time. Knight e2, it's hard to understand. c5, knight c3, c6, knight a4. So this is very strange play by white, and I think definitely some endgame strategy should be learned, because we can't really play chess like this, right? Just moving the knight to the right, to the left, and then back. We should have some kind of concrete plan. And if we don't, then we should at least have some kind of idea of how to improve the position. The obvious plan for white is to push g4 at some point, but up until then, we can kind of just improve the king. And as mentioned, knight e3 also helps with g4. With c6, knight e4, king f2 now, h3, so white has the right idea in mind, g4, this works out, and black even allows g5. So now white has a 2-on-1 majority over here, so this is a very clear asset. So obviously white will not just go and create a queen here, but some of black's pieces will have to remain passive to combat this passed pawn. In the meantime, white, in the principle of two weaknesses, can start creating one on the queen side, maybe a3, b4, maybe to play c5 to fix this pawn, or to get this pawn away from c5 so that the knight can go there to attack c6, something like this. In some cases, maybe even the king can go towards the pawn on a7, who knows. So in general, these endgames are played quite slowly, but they don't really require much calculation. We kind of just have to look for a plan and go for it. And okay, knight c3, knight e2, I have to defend the pawn, and we could just use the king as well. But okay, knight e2, knight c3. So as I understand, white is trying to defend from d5, but this is very passive play. We can't defend and attack at the same time. Our pieces must be as active as possible. And here, for example, we can try h4 and h5 to continue our initiative. And if black wants to play d5, now this pawn on c5 is really weak. We can insert h5 as it will be useful. And then we can try to attack the newly created weakness on c5. This passed pawn is not particularly scary, because there will be no one that will help it. And these are two weaknesses. We also have this plan. So slowly but surely, white should be able to, for example, king g6, king g3 to defend this pawn. And again, we have plans of a3, b4. We can remaneuver the bishop somewhere. Black is kind of in zugzwang in this position. He can move the bishop, but after b3, we can put the knight on d3, which would be a better square. And white is just winning. So black can't really push his passed pawn, so he is forced to sit and wait, which usually isn't a very good strategy. So what I was talking about in psychological improvements is that no matter what the position is, if we're not lost, we should not accept draws, simply because when we're playing tournaments, we have to understand that we are here to play, right? We're not here to get results, right? We must not be result oriented, because if we're only going to be oriented with results, then we will forget the process, right? And if we want results, we can always make a draw against low-rated players. It will never be a horrible outcome, but at the same time, we should be trying to win all of our games, right? And if we fail, well, then we will learn something. So it's a win-win situation. So for next time, I would suggest just never offering draws and never accepting draws. And this is a simple rule to have for yourself, and this will help you in the long run in your chess journey.